I've been keen to do this rig rundown video for you guys for such a long time. I just had to wait for this to come back from Ford from getting a new engine. I don't know if you can hear that. She's bugging. She's bugging. G'day dirty mutters. Bonnet up on the Ford Ranger. Not a good sign, is it? Especially on the new V6 next gen one. You wouldn't expect to have the bonnet up, would you? Well, the Ford Ranger engine let go. I mean, absolutely catastrophic failure. It had been weeping a bit of oil and it had been using oil, which I was unsure why. I couldn't see where it was coming from. All I was getting was drips on the ground and a bit of oil underneath the car. So I was, topping it up every day religiously, making sure it was all sorted before I could get to a Ford dealer. Like, we've done, 10,000 Ks tripping around in one hit. I was still thousands of kilometres where this car broke down before I got home. Well, let's start from the beginning. Well, folks, I'm on a plenty highway and the Ford has been going exceptionally well. All of a sudden, started making a rattling noise, pulled over the side of the road, and I think it's pretty catastrophic. I don't know if you can hear that. She's bugging. She's bugging. So, got the caravan in tow. Hooked it up to the MDC camper over here. This is how good the towing capacity is on these big shackles and recovery points. Hooked it up to the Ranger. We're going to put it under here. I'm just going to get under here. I'm going to pull the tail shaft off. So, so I can tow it freely without any dramas and all the rest of the stuff. So, wish me luck, folks. As you'll notice in that little video, it had L plates on it. So my beautiful daughter Hannah was driving. She was towing the caravan. We're cruising along the Plenty Highway. Okay, not doing anything crazy, 60 to 70 k an hour, just enjoying the sights. And then all of a sudden, the stereo was on as well. This massive sound came through, and I'd just been around engines a long time. I crapped myself because I went, that is no good. I turned the stereo down. By the time I turned the stereo down, the car had conked out. We'd pulled over onto the side of the road. I'm a bit white actually, because I'm like, what do I do here? I'm on a time schedule, heading back from filming. I'm got to be in the US, and I've got 2 days to get home. I'm cutting it fine as it is. I've opened the bonnet up, had a bit of a look. You can't really see anything. I've checked the oil. All the oil's gone. I'm like, I know what this is. It has I don't know, the oil is just gone somewhere, whether it's rocks come up and punched a hole in the sump and it's just dumped it or something. I've looked underneath, there's no hole in the sump. Where could this have gone? The whole underside of the car was sprayed in oil. We didn't know at that stage. So I said to Vaughan, mate, you are gonna have to tow me. I mean, he's got the Y62, he's got the big camper trailer on the back. He's gonna be towing the Ford Ranger on a 3-ton van. So look, the Y62 is gonna do it, but it's no mean feat. Look, we've got to go 80 to 100 Ks to the next station, which is called 𝗕𝗢𝗚𝗚𝗘𝗗, right on the Queensland Northern Territory border. Anyway, if you've been around vehicles as long as me, you know that towing an automatic with the tail shaft in neutral completely ruins the auto boxes. So first job was to get underneath and disconnect the tail shaft. So we did that, we hooked up all the straps, and then luckily these cars obviously have electronic steering and all that sort of stuff. So I still had steering and I still had good brakes, but it was draining the battery very, very quickly. We've cruised down there, windows down, the car's got full of dust, but we're on the move, we're safe with people that we're traveling with. You know, we've pulled into 𝗕𝗢𝗚𝗚𝗕𝗗 station. Those guys have got Optus service there, which is really good. I have an Optus phone and a Telstra phone. That covers me where there's phone service. And for where I don't have phone service, I have Starlink for traveling remotely. Now that gives you unbelievable fast internet. And guys, if you don't have Starlink or some sort of satellite phone type device for when you are remote like that, if you were by yourself, it'd be pretty nasty. Like you'd have to be waiting for some locals to drive past or some station owners or whatever else to actually get help. At least, you know, if I was by myself, I could have put up the Starlink and I could have just phoned someone and told them where I was and blah, 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 and got help. We had the caravan, we could have been, I had Tucker, so we could have stayed there for another 3 or 4 days. Travel plans would have been put out, but you know, them's the breaks, eh? Anyway, I digress. We've pulled into 𝗕𝗢𝗚𝗚𝗓𝗏 station. We're on the phone to Ford, going, guys, this is pretty nasty, pretty bad news, it's buggered, blah, blah. And they say, look, we're gonna have to get out a mechanic. I'm like, well, to get out a mechanic to have a look at this thing is gonna cost a fortune to do that. And I'm telling you, I'm a qualified mechanic myself. I might not be the best mechanic in the world, but I can tell you when the motor's buggered. I explained all that. They went, okay, too easy. We'll probably just send out a truck and a, you know, like a tilt tray to pick up the car. And here comes the curveball again, folks. When you have a trailer or caravan on the back, you have to pay extra for the recovery. So that was a bit of an eye-opener for me. I thought if you had RACQ Ultra or you had the Ford cover, you know, the cover that any sort of manufacturer gives you, you know, for roadside assistance, you would think it would cover what you're towing, but it does not. Okay, it'll give you 100 Ks or 50 Ks or something. But remember, we are in the middle of nowhere. I didn't care at that stage. I said, whatever it costs, let's get it cracking. I've then spoken to Vaughan, said, how am I gonna get home? I've got all our stuff in the caravan. You know, what can we do? And he said, mate, I'll tell you what, we'll leave the camper trailer here because it's not desperate for us to have it. He goes, hook on the 16-foot van onto their 300 series and we'll head off. And like by the time we'd done all this mucking about, right, it was in the afternoon. So we decided not to press on at that time of the day and we've stuck around, which I tell you was unreal. So I'm kicking back, caravan's all set up, slipping into a beer, and here comes the tractor with a big beast, a cow on it that they just butchered, like just shot and bled out and whatever else gutted. They're bringing it back to put it in the freezer. As you can see from these little videos I took on my phone, how they're carving up the beast and all that sort of stuff and feeding the dog. It was an absolute awesome experience to actually be there on a station when they're killing their own animals for food. That's the circle of life. It was absolutely humbling to be there at that stage. One of the blokes, he slipped with the knife and actually, you know, sliced himself really badly in the leg. And the guys, you know, did the first aid on him and got him stabilised, but it was that bad, they had to call in the flying doctors. Look, I'm just saying, folks, this just doesn't happen usually. Like, if your car doesn't break down, we wouldn't have stayed at the station. We wouldn't have got to see the cow be butchered. We wouldn't have been involved in a rescue that had the flying doctors come in. So what had to happen next is that it was getting dark, okay? And we had to light the runway. These remote runways, they're dirt. They're not like the asphalt that you see at the normal airports in town. They've got to be lit, like so the plane knows where to land. But there's no electricity. There's no like lights you can just turn on. We actually had to light up all these drums. They're like big coffee or Milo tins, you know, like a foot high and half a foot round and whatever else. The secret to lighting that up is actually toilet rolls. They get diesel, they soak the toilet roll in diesel, they put it in the tin and they light it up. So on that little video you're seeing there of the runway with the lights on it, that's actually toilet paper soaked in diesel burning, giving the light for the plane so it knows where to land and where to take off. It was just a sensational experience because unless you're out in remote Australia, you're not going to experience that type of thing. So from a negative, it's turned into an adventure of a lifetime for myself, my wife, and the kids. Like, there's new things that we're experiencing every minute. How did we get home, you're saying? Well, we got the 300 series off Vaughan, we hooked onto that 16-foot van, and we took off home. So after all that excitement, it was time for bed. We got up the next day at 𝗬𝗪𝗡, and we had to make a mile. But as what always happens when you're on a time schedule, things go wrong. Dave from Clearview was travelling with us by this stage as well, and his wheel alignment had gone out on his van, and it was starting to scrub out tyres, and he was blowing tyres. You know, you've only got 2 spares. Luckily, like, we had the same stud pattern stuff on the van that we got, the camper that Vaughan had there, so we managed to be able to keep giving him tyres to get there. So we limped it into Winton. I've done my best to wheel align it, but it had a bent stub axle, so wasn't much we could do about that. So we limped it into Winton. We got the maddest feed at the Winton pub, and yeah, we went and made camp, and you know, had to get up the next day like real early, because we had to be back in Toowoomba that next day, because I flew out the day after. So like, we're cutting this time schedule right to the bone. We left Dave in Winton. He had to get another couple of tyres, put on some rims, so when he was dragging it home, he had other tyres to change. So it's all going on. But the next day, thankfully, we had a good run, you know. So we got up again really early, hit the road, and we pulled into Toowoomba like 8:30 that night. Then the fun begins. I'm on a plane to America. This thing is still waiting to be towed to 𝗬𝗨𝗟𝗟. So eventually, Ford get a truck right out there in the middle of nowhere, pick the Ranger up and the camper trailer, and take it to the 𝗬𝗟𝗟. They start inspecting it at Ford. They've gone, well, this is the first one that we've seen, like, that's had a failure, so we sort of don't know what the go is, because, like, let's face it, this is one of the first V6s into Australia, you know, because like here at DMW, we're trying to stay ahead of the game, so we put orders in for vehicles really early in the piece so we can get them, do our testing on them, you know, like this type of stuff, go to the middle of Australia and see how they hack it. Anyway, they have found the line that goes from the turbo to the sump has split. The fitting must have failed somehow, and it had cracked, and that's where the oil was going. I'm topping the oil up every day, wondering where it's going, whether it's burning it. There's a slight drip on the ground, but nothing that I could really see, because I'm driving all the time, so most of it's getting sprayed underneath the car. It's only what's dripping out on the ground when we're stopped. So if you know anything about engines, when they're running, you obviously have an oil pump, and that's pumping the oil around everywhere. It's got a line feeding from the oil pump into the turbocharger. It's lubricating the turbocharger, and then it's got a feed line, like a drain line out of the turbo back to the sump of the vehicle. So that's why it's not blowing out on the ground when I've got it running at idle or whatever else, because it's not getting huge amounts of oil pressure there until we're actually driving the car and revving it. As I said, Hannah was driving at the time, so I didn't see what lights came on the dash or anything like that. We already had an engine light that had come on the trip. I didn't know whether that was a sensor reversing or, you know, different other things, because obviously we just put a tray on it. There's little bits and pieces that we still had to work out. The normal scan tool that you take didn't actually tell me what the code meant and what it was for. So wasn't saying it was low on oil pressure. I did find out from Ford what that code was, and it was actually a glow plug fault. That wasn't that bad to have an engine light on, but guys, it didn't throw an oil light. When I started it, in that little video that you saw at the beginning, have a look at the dash. There's no red light saying it's got no oil pressure. How's a 16-year-old girl gonna know when they're learning if none of the lights come up on the dash? So I gave Hannah, you know, a pass on that one. The car didn't seem to be losing any power or anything like that. I was passenger and listening to the stereo, having a great time. So, with your Ford Ranger, if you see a drop of oil coming out of your bi-turbo or the V6 or whatever, take it to the dealership, because you do not want that line or that fitting failing at any stage, because especially where I was out in the middle of nowhere. So guys, I'd really love you to comment below on this video and tell me if you've heard of these issues with the Fords yourselves already out there. How many are out there that you've heard have blown up? It's probably just that one simple little fitting that has let go. But here comes the kicker. You'd think that I'd be wild and I'd be selling the Ford and whatever else. Complete opposite, actually. With the way Ford handled this whole thing, I am blown away with the experience, and I would buy another fleet of Ford Rangers tomorrow, because the roadside assistance from Ford picked it up from out west, okay? We got a hire car when we were back in 𝗕𝗢𝗓𝗓, right, to drive around in. So what else could you ask for? Like, that is sensational. And then once Ford had diagnosed exactly what had gone on, they replaced the turbo, they replaced the engine, they replaced everything else that got damaged or was potentially damaged. And then you know what else they did to make it even better? They delivered it from Mount Isa to 𝗕𝗢𝗓𝗓. That's 3,000 Ks. Wow. You tell me what other brands of vehicles you've heard of having that great after sales service and warranty service from a manufacturer. I'd love to hear about it, you know, if you have had an experience where it's good. I've heard plenty of bad experiences from people with what vehicles have, you know, failed and all that sort of stuff, and they're up the manufacturer and there's no service afterwards and they've had the most terrible experience. But I couldn't talk highly enough of Ford. Absolutely blew me away. I'm not sponsored by Ford. I've got no affiliation with Ford Motor Company Australia. I am just telling you this out of the experience I have had. Well, thanks for watching, Dirty Mutters. That's the story of the old Ford Ranger in the outback. If you've liked this video, press subscribe, hit the bell button so you're notified whenever we do new videos, and I'll catch you on the next one.